We've seen where the resources come from on Rabaska, but what are they used for? In today's episode of Laurence Plays Factorio Planetary Pioneers, we're going to look at how I've been bullying Mike by sending him off on a much longer chain of requirements than we expected. This all started because hacking the vaults is very temporary. We've set up automated systems to re-hack the vaults, but it's a hassle, and to make things worse, it requires a steady stream of the vault access keys. Whilst we can obtain those through mining the Rabascan scrap, that's not a good long-term solution for several reasons. Firstly, you only get a key from about 10% of the mining attempts. The rest end up being weak ammo, which we don't need. Secondly, the patches are relatively small and don't contain all that many keys. We need some kind of automated solution. So, I asked Mike to start making me some vault access keys from raw materials, and while he was doing that, I dealt with the excess ammo that we'd accumulated. Step 1 was a simple sortometron to separate out the access keys and all of the ammo here, giving each one its own belt. This was at the point when I thought we might actually want some of this stuff, but in the end though, I just dumped all of these belts straight into the recycling system. It was originally quite a small and neat recycling system, but a lot of expansion happened rather suddenly because we needed a lot of vault access keys before production was running nicely. The recycling felt very wasteful, but it did give us a useful source of iron plates from the yellow magazines, rockets and the grenades. This was fed out onto the bus, but initially we didn't have much use for it, so there's an overflow of that into recyclers as well. I'm sure we won't regret throwing away all this perfectly good ammunition. Okay, back to Mike. Making a vault access key seems relatively straightforward. All you need is some beta-carotene, which we're already making. You saw Tristan set up for that in the last video. Some red circuits, which are a pretty standard resource, how hard can it be? And finally some turbofish. These critters live in the lakes of energetic residue, and we've seen fish breeding in the past, so surely the turbo version will be even quicker. Let's take a look at making red circuits first though. On Rabaska, this is done by skimming the energetic residue. I guess it's a bit like a liquid version of the Fulgoran scrap. We're doing that in these assemblers here. It takes in 100, but you get 90% of that back, so we need some header tanks to make sure there's always somewhere for the assemblers to drain out into. But that's a problem we solved in the past, it's just a pump and a cable. Then, yes, about one run in 20 we'll get a red circuit out, but we'll also sometimes get green circuits, plastic bottles and spoilage. Fine, some of those sound vaguely useful, we'll see how we get on with them. Note that Mike has used separate inserters for each output. This means that he can use stack inserters without the machine's outputs jamming up, but it's meant that he's needed to put these side belts in as well because there's only room for 3 inserters along the side of the machine. Using stack inserters allows us to fit a lot more resources onto the belts, and given that there's 4 different ones coming out here, that seems like a good idea. This recipe is nice and simple, and it does work, but it's quite slow, and we can't really use speed modules very much on this planet due to the 30 megawatt limit imposed on us. In fact, to minimise power usage, each assembler has 2 efficiency modules in it to bring power consumption down to the 20% minimum. These machines do have 4 module slots though, so we could add in a speed module and an extra efficiency module, and as long as we stick with tier 3 modules, that would keep us at minimum power consumption while still getting a 50% speed boost. That would have been a good idea at the time, and we have started to use that sort of balance in the future, but it doesn't make a huge difference. Instead, we've compensated by using a significant number of machines in order to bring production up to a useful level. These machines are a significant drain on our power. At various times, Assembler 3s have been using a full half of our available power, which is a bit alarming. The other problem with a recipe that produces lots of outputs is keeping everything in balance. As you can see, we currently have too many green circuits, which is preventing the red circuits from flowing. We also have far too much spoilage, as we're not using it for anything at the moment. However, Sophia has set up a system here to dump excess spoilage into a heating tower for disposal. The splitter is set to prioritise putting the spoilage on the starboard output, meaning that we'll only ever see any on the port side where he's monitoring it, if there's an excess and it backs up. If we ever see any there, it'll trigger the inserters to load the heating tower and burn off some of the excess. I'm not sure why he's done it like this, rather than just running the low priority side directly into the heating tower like this, but the system he's built will also work fine, so there's no point in changing it, even though I just did. To get this working again, we'll need to set something up to dispose of the excess green circuits, again just like on Fulgora, to allow the red circuits to keep flowing. And maybe we'll need the same for the plastic bottles as well in the future. We shall see. Still, that is red circuits being made, at least in theory. I guess we better go and look at the fish. Ingredient 3 is the infamous turbofish, and this one has a couple of loops in it just to keep us guessing. The actual fish breeding stage seems fairly simple. We need some harine gas, but that's okay, Tristan's pumping that in from the mines in the north. We need a source fish, not a fish source, or 2, but it produces 3, so that seems sustainable. And then we need a protein shake. I've not seen any cows around here, so I don't think we'll be using whey protein, but I guess we're going to have to trace that one back and see where it comes from. Okay, protein shakes are complicated. They require the plastic bottles that we saw coming out from the residue scraping, at least that's a solved problem, then some beta-carotene, also solved. Then it gets a bit harder. We need protein powder and calcite. It looks like the protein powder can only be made by processing a turbofish, and this is about the point where Mike started to worry about production levels. If making a fish requires protein and protein requires fish, is it going to be sustainable? Fortunately, 1 fish makes 5 protein, and 4 protein makes 1 shake makes 1 fish. So each time the loop runs, we'll gain 1 protein powder or a quarter of a shake. It's not a lot, but at least it's on the right side of 0. Armed with this positive outlook, he started building, and here you can see his early proof of concept design. The fish are happily breeding up at the top, and then being turned into protein powder in the middle, which can be shaken up below. Mike informs me that this design is nicely to ratio, but unfortunately we can't really tell at the moment because of the shortage of plastic bottles coming through due to the excess of green circuits. He's even making the access keys in the middle as requested. This is a good proof of concept. The output is being produced as requested, but it's not big or powerful enough, and it's not being clever about machine use. Let's skip forward a week. This is much better. You can see the additional machines at every stage, and if we look more closely, you can see that most of the fish breeders have had their chemical plants swapped out for biochambers. This works really nicely because the biochambers can be fueled with the protein shakes as well, so we don't need to worry about an additional nutrient supply, and happily, due to the efficiency modules in there, the shakes last for ages, and the additional 50% productivity from the biochamber more than covers the fuel cost, so we end up with extra protein shakes in the end, and biochambers mean no electricity cost. They are entirely powered by the protein shakes. A side note of this, however, is that whilst the protein shakes are consumed fully during the fish breeding process, the ones powering the biochambers do return their plastic bottles for refilling, and with the current design side-loading onto the belt, that's going to jam up quite soon. That'll need to be swapped out for a priority splitter. Continuing to the south, we see that the assembler making the access keys has been replaced with a pair of forges, because the access keys count as a military device. This gives us a free 25% productivity on them, which is nice, and we've topped that up further with a module for a total of 35%. If you look closely, you'll also see that there's a degradation module from Pelagos tucked in there too, because we don't want the quality buff that the forges give. We'd like to have everything at normal quality so that the turrets and later buildings, which we'll talk about in another video, don't get confused. This is the sort of place I was thinking of when I mentioned the degradation modules in the last series. They're quite niche, but they're very useful when you need them. You can see that we now have a healthy supply of red circuits and bottles coming in, and so the access cards are heading out and going to feed the turrets that are capturing the vaults. Lovely. In fact, we've even made enough of them they've backed up all the way down one of the belts. The perspicacious among you will remember that I've missed an ingredient. I got a little bit too excited about the fish, and so we better go back to where we make the shake. This recipe also requires calcite, and whilst there is some trickling through, that's not what I call a healthy supply. Calcite is another resource which has a special Robascan recipe. Up here to the north, Sophia is bringing in the purple rock haronite, along with some sulfuric acid, which is made in the traditional way from sulfur, iron and water, and all of these are produced from voles. We can then wash the purple off this haronite rock to get some normal rock. Okay, why not? And then the leftover purple appears to consist of a valuable calcite and a bit of harine gas byproduct. I knew there was a reason we weren't filling the tanks completely. That's another one that needs a header tank. This is running a lot slower than I would like because of a major shortage of haronite, and that's rippling through to basically everything that we care about on this planet. And this shows the other difficulty of this planet, apart from the power cap. The valuable resources come from vaults, and capturing and keeping vaults requires a certain amount of effort, and at the moment is a bit of a struggle. We'll be looking into ways to improve our vault access quite soon though. Having that level of stability is going to be extremely important in making this planet able to look after itself, at least to a reasonable extent. That'll all be in a future video though, so make sure you subscribe so you don't miss it. We'll be back streaming on Monday at 7:30 PM UK time, and maybe we'll have finished Robasca by then. There's only one way to find out. I'll also be streaming something else on Wednesday, maybe another LucasArts adventure game, maybe another Factorio mod, we shall see. I hope you've enjoyed the video, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.